You know when you remember a game from years ago, a game you never actually owned but maybe played a demo of, watched a trailer for, or even just read about in a gaming magazine, and you swear that game wasn't real, it could not have been real, it was too far-fetched, and you must have dreamt it up during a fever. But then, lo and behold, you suddenly do remember it for whatever reason, you do a little bit of Google searching with the fragments that do come to mind, and ta-da! There's the game that you thought you made up all those years ago. And for me, that game is Stretch Panic. Also known as Freak Out in Europe, I cannot describe this game in any other way than, this is weird. Honestly, this has got to be one of the strangest games I've ever picked up in my life, and I've just played a game about a chicken fighting off sentient cubes from another dimension.
Cock it.
I think I first read about Stretch Panic in a PlayStation magazine of some sort. It was in one of those sections where they list multiple small or unheard of games that have just been released, and I think I remember being attracted to the bright colours and stylisation of the characters. I was like 9 at the time, so that was the sort of thing I loved. I mean, I love it now, don't get me wrong, but I was crazy for it when I was 9 years old. But I swear, out of all of the pictures that were included in that short review, none of them showed off just how wacky Stretch Panic could be. Yeah. This is the game I'm going to show you today. Now, you don't need me to tell you how sexist this is. And oh my god, what is even happening right now? But I do wonder if this is the reason my parents never bought me Stretch Panic. You see, every birthday or Christmas, like most kids, unless I was incredibly spoiled, I hope I wasn't, my parents would get me to write down a list of things I would like, and being a gaming nut since the tender age of 4 or 5, my list was naturally full of video games, and I vaguely remember adding this on there. I never did receive Stretch Panic as a gift, and you know what? I'm so happy about that after seeing the monstrosities on display here.
Tits.
Actually, there is another reason I'm grateful I didn't get this game. This has got to be one of the shortest, and yet at the same time most frustrating games I've played in a good long while. This could actually beat Shrek Treasure Hunt on the annoying scale. Now, I went into this game with virtually no knowledge whatsoever apart from what I read in that short review. I remembered it was about a little girl and she had some sort of magic outfit, a hat or something. It wasn't a hat, it was a scarf, but that's what I thought. And this hat was an evil hand in reality. And I also remembered she was on a mission to rescue her possessed sisters from whatever. I think I'm mostly correct to be fair, but honestly it's really hard to tell because this game doesn't tell you anything. Seriously, you watch the opening cutscene for Stretch Panic and I can guarantee you'll be as confused as I was when I first started. But I will get to that in a sec, as I just want to briefly discuss the development. So, Stretch Panic was developed by Treasure, a Japanese company I've personally never heard of, but apparently they were a big thing in the early to mid-90s, making some fairly decent and critically successful titles such as their first game, Gunstar Heroes on the Sega Genesis. Or Mega Drive for us smelly non-Americans. Stretch Panic was released between July and December of 2001, depending on the region, and was a landmark game for Treasure as it was their first title to feature movement on a 3D plane. While that's a huge stepping stone for a primarily 2D games development company, and kudos to them for giving it a go, it definitely shows that this is their first attempt at 3D. The lock-on is temperamental, the camera never wants to do anything to help you out, bloody typical, and the main mechanic of the game is more a hindrance at times than a handy tool at your disposal. Get it, handy. But before we fall down that rabbit hole, let's just try and ground ourselves into the story, because I'm sure you're all dying to know what's going on. Well, to be truthful, I have no idea. Like I said, I went into this with very small snippets of what I could remember from that review all those years ago. And in fact, after watching the opening cutscene, I'm left even more clueless than when I first began. So it's best I explain it to you with the aid of the font of all knowledge that is Wikipedia. Actually, before I tell you what's going on, how about you watch the opening cutscene yourself and try and guess what the story is, like who these characters are, what is about to happen. Go. So do you have any idea what's going on? If not, don't worry, I have Wikipedia on hand to help. So this is Linda. Linda lives with her 12 sisters who treat her like trash and constantly send her out on errands. Whilst out fetching stuff for her sisters, Linda is almost run down by a truck, which just so happens to be delivering a mysterious parcel to her house. Her greedy sisters of course open it, and unleash a horde of vanity demons which in turn possess them. The last demon becomes stuck in Linda's scarf, and then the whole lot of them get sucked into another dimension. It's then up to Linda to rescue her 12 sisters with the power of her newly possessed scarf thing, because, yeah. I mean, personally, I didn't get any of that from the opening cutscene, but maybe I'm just dumb. So you're thrown into this strange black and white Etch-a-Sketch hub area, and the game doesn't explain anything to you beyond this point. Honestly, I was so confused for the first 5 minutes of gameplay, as I had absolutely no clue what the purpose of this room was, why I was here, or more importantly, what I was supposed to be doing. So I set about mashing buttons to see what little Linda here could do, and got to grips with the main mechanic of the game, moving and grabbing stuff with the evil scarf hand thingy. You know what, let's just call him Fred from now on. Fred is fundamental to your progress throughout the game, as without him you won't be able to defeat the various bosses and enemies you come across. Interestingly, you move Fred around the screen by way of the right analog stick, something that I thought would be irritating to get the hang of whilst also trying to move Linda with the left, but it actually felt incredibly smooth to use. I like the contrast between Linda and Fred too. Given she's only a little girl, it makes sense that Linda is incapable of much of anything besides running very slowly.
Well, we're waiting.
She can't jump. She can't clamber up even the smallest of ledges without great effort on her part, and she struggles to walk up slight inclines. Fred, however, is fairly nimble, even within the confines of his woolen prison, able to move around Linda at a decent speed, grab and pinch enemies, objects, and the environment itself from quite a distance away, and he can even give Linda a helping hand, when it comes to traversing certain areas. If you need to make your way up a high platform or across a chasm, have Fred grab the ground, pull back until he's built up enough tension, and release whatever he's holding on to make Linda sail through the sky. It's a pretty fun mechanic that unfortunately isn't used all that often during Stretch Panic. I never found a need for it during boss fights, and it takes so long to build up the tension necessary to launch Linda a fair distance that you can't even use it to cover ground more quickly. This leads on to a bigger issue I have with Fred. But before I get into that, it's best I explain what Stretch Panic boils down to in terms of gameplay. Well, I can sum it up in a few words for you. Boss fights. Boss fights everywhere. Now, I have no issues with bosses making up 90% of a game's runtime. One of the best titles I've ever played is Shadow of the Colossus, and that boils down to cutscene, travelling, boss, repeat. The problem with Stretch Panic, however, is there's nothing to do besides fight the bosses. Well, there's the occasional points grind, but we'll get to that in a second. All you essentially do in this game is walk through a door, watch a cutscene showing one of the sisters being possessed, smack them up until they explode, and then leave through another door before repeating the process all over again. There's no travelling great distances, no secrets to find in a bright and colourful world, and even the cutscenes for the boss entries get tiresome very early on, as it's the exact same setup each time, with only the level design, demon, and sister in question changing. Don't get me wrong, I think the boss designs are brilliant, and each has their own unique abilities to spice up the battle. I'll just quickly run through them to give you an idea of what I was up against. The first boss I fought was Cinder, a demon with a humongous head who not only breathes fire, but also uses its pigtails like jet engines to fly through the air and land on top of Linda. Next up was Spinner. Clues in the name. It can use its scythe-like head to cut up Linda if she's not fast enough to evade its attacks. Then there was Siren, a motherly figure who surrounds itself with adorable little critters. A cocoon then engulfs them, which in turn morphs said critters into horrible little monsters with scythes, whilst Siren gains the ability to cool down lightning. Up next was Miss Mecha, a giant robot would you believe, with the ability to spin its arms wildly, as well as fire heat-seeking missiles. Then there was Samantha, a demon very similar in abilities to Linda herself, who can use her fishing rod arm to grab and throw heavy boulders, or great balls of fire. Next was Jelly-chan, a demon blob with detachable eyes that fire lasers at Linda. Face Off was up next, a boss I can only describe as Mrs. Potato Head.
Hey, no one takes my wife's mouth, except me.
Android version 2.1 was an odd fight that had you up against its electricity-spewing creations more than the actual boss itself. Mirage is a desert-dwelling demon that can summon tornadoes as well as chase you underneath the ground. Looks like a snake, lives in the sand, has giant creepy eyes. Why does that sound familiar? Oh god, go, 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 go. Oh my god. Oh my Jesus Christ. Oh my god. That was closer than I thought it was going to be. Oh, a rock. The next one I fought was Siren, an alien-like boss that's immune to your attacks unless you help out the little floating dudes surrounding her. Demonica was my personal favourite. A unique fight in the sense you're not so much battling the boss as you are trying to stop it breaking in and instantly killing you. It'll occasionally try to smash down doors, break through the floor, or even appear in the stained glass windows, so you'll have to be quick and alert to what's going on around you in order to stop it making its way inside. The last boss of the game, Spirit, was incredibly difficult in my opinion, with hands that'll grab you and take a big chunk of your health off if you're not quick enough to smack them away, small towers that shoot fire, lasers, explosives, missiles, you name it. And all while this is going on, you have to watch where you're walking, else you'll stumble into one of the rolling spike balls on the edge of the platform. All in all, very unique and interesting boss fights that'll keep you on your toes. Unfortunately, all this originality is let down by extremely awkward gameplay mechanics on your end. As exhilarating as it was to battle these big old meanies, I frequently ran into issues with the camera, the lock-on ability, and more worryingly, controlling the demon hand itself. Depth perception is a huge pain in the arse here, as you try to desperately make Fred latch onto something specific, only to miss the mark by just a few inches. And sometimes it's not even depth perception's fault. Instead of grabbing the boss or a generic enemy straight in front of him, Fred would rather hold onto the ground and refuse to let go. And sometimes he'd clearly be touching an enemy or object, but pass through it as if it weren't there. Given how much damage some of these bosses can inflict upon you, it is incredibly frustrating to fail over and over and over simply because the hand mechanic doesn't want to play ball. It was so frustrating in fact that I never actually finished Stretch Panic, simply because I could not get Fred to work with me during the last boss fight. Spirit throws so much crap at you that even missing just one grab and pinch can result in a good chunk of your health being removed, and I died over and over and over again. But you know what makes this game so much worse? Backtracking. So for whatever reason, possibly the fear that their game would be too short otherwise, the devs decided to add a points requirement to every boss. You cannot enter a boss battle unless you have the necessary amount of points to do so, and in order to get said points, you need to visit these EX levels filled with those busty babes I showed you earlier, and take out as many as you can, with 1 point earned per successful attack. You can leave these levels anytime you want, you're not required to kill everything in sight, but my lord, talk about padding. Oh, and if you die on a boss fight and you don't have enough points to retry, you have to go back to these levels and grind some more. There's one more thing I need to mention that I didn't actually know about until I looked up a walkthrough after I'd given up on the game. You technically haven't finished the game unless you exercise every demon. And in order to exercise a demon, you need to perform a special maneuver known as a scarf bomb attack. And the scarf bomb attack costs 5 points to use, and still has a chance to fail if you don't use it correctly.
Why are we still here?
You know what, I am actually grateful to myself for giving up on Stretch Panic, because if I had spent another hour trying to defeat this boss, only to realise I'd done every single one of them wrong and would have to repeat each one, what's even more annoying is this wasn't even a case of me not paying attention. At no point does the game explain any of this to you. Not in the opening cutscene, not when you first land in Etch-a-Sketch World, not even during boss fights. And looking through the options is a complete waste of time too, as it only makes mention of the most basic controls, without even so much as a hint to the scarf bomb's existence in the game. Oh, and I forgot to show you, this is the title screen, isn't it beautiful? I particularly love that shade of I haven't drank enough water yellow, very nice. Admittedly, a lot of the game's information in regards to backstory and controls and whatnot is held in the game's manual, which I don't have because I'm emulating the game, but to be honest, that information should be included in the game itself. What if I bought a second-hand copy of the game and didn't have a manual with it? How would I know how to exorcise the demons? If it wasn't for our glorious saviour Wikipedia, I'd be really stuck. Now, if realising I had to defeat every boss a second time just to exorcise them wasn't enough to make me blow my lid, doing all that and then seeing the ending would have been the final nail in the coffin for this game. That's it. That's what I would have got if I went through every single boss again. Thank God I'm a lazy gamer. Honestly, what a cheap, boring ending. Especially after that pretty cool, if not incredibly confusing opening cutscene we got. I mean, what happened? Did you run out of time, Treasure? Care? Could you not have cut out all that padding with the tits McGee so I could actually have a decent ending? Ultimately, I have to say, because of the issues Stretch Panic does have, and because of that piss poor ending, it's not a great game. It has a fantastic original idea, I really do love the scarf hand mechanic, but having an original idea is not a lot of use if you can't get it to work properly in your game. If you're going to base every attack I can do around using Fred, the controls need to be spot on. And unfortunately, as I've shown you throughout this review, they just ain't, son. And given a lot of these boss fights are already incredibly difficult with tons of attacks being thrown in Linda's direction, you cannot waste time pinching the floor instead of an enemy, grabbing an ally instead of the boss, completely just passing through some objects as if they weren't there. You get the idea, it just doesn't work. And it's a real shame because Stretch Panic, Freak Out, whatever you want to call it, could have been a potentially fantastic game if they just ironed out the bugs. But instead, they gave you a short-ass, clunky and slightly sexist game that feels like someone stretched out an unfinished tech demo into a full-release title. I did it again, did you see? You like those puns, don't you? Shout out to supporters, Klaxon, Thomas Hinton, Jeffrey Thomas, Ray Zach, Mr. Zugador, Ross Ward, Samuel DeBoss, Poplio the Destroyer, Merendor, Trevor, Oblivion, and Justin Tergerson. Thank you to everyone who continues to support the channel on Patreon with all the donations, with the YouTube memberships every month. I really, really appreciate it. If you're someone who maybe wants to donate but can't afford to, that's fine. Like I say all the time, the fact you guys always watch the videos is so friggin' awesome, and I really, really hope you guys are enjoying these reviews. I know I haven't done things like Let's Plays in a while, but I feel like this is a better formula for the channel. Love to know what you guys think about it so far after, what has it been, a month and a half of me doing these? But yeah, just want to say once again, thank you so much for continuing to support the channel and keeping me motivated to do this, because YouTube do not make it easy. You make reviews, you make like reviews once a week, no matter how long they take. They're like, hey, you're not uploading every day. We don't want to like advertise you now. So yeah, thank you for keeping me motivated, guys. And yeah, I hope you're all having a good day, evening, whatever. So ta-ta!